Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I just hit 1,000 subscribers. That happened really fast for me. So if you're subscribed, thank you for that. Welcome back if you're a subscriber, thanks for watching. If you're not a subscriber, hi, my name is Brittany, and in today's video, if you just randomly stumbled on this, today's video I will be talking about how to draft button plackets anywhere on your garment for any article of clothing that you're sewing. So for me in particular, I'll put a little link to the video up in the top right. I recently drafted a dress. It was actually my first garment I've ever self-drafted. I didn't use a commercial sewing pattern and it came out so cute. So if you want to see it, make sure to click that link on the top right. But when I was drafting that, I was looking everywhere online for a video about how to draft a skirt where the buttons ran down the side like that. And I couldn't find a single video. I found plenty of videos where they talked about how to put buttonholes down the center of a garment, but none that weren't on the center. So I did a lot of research. I even bought a textbook about how to draft patterns. I will be doing a couple of demos about how to draft a button placket anywhere on your garment. The first one I'll do is I'll be recreating the skirt portion of the dress I created. So I'll talk about how to make an A-line skirt and then how to take that skirt pattern, your A-line skirt pattern, and how to put buttons on the side of it. That's gonna be my first demo. And then for the second demo, I'm just gonna grab a commercial sewing pattern piece I have. I'll just use a bodice piece. And I'm just going to pick a random line somewhere on the garment where I would like to put buttons, and I will show how to draft the pattern to account for the extra fabric you'll need and how to do that, how to put a line of buttons anywhere on the garment, not just the center front. If I'm one of the first videos that came up for you when you searched how to add buttons down the side of a skirt, how to add buttons anywhere on your garment, please make sure to like this video or comment and engage in some way so that YouTube knows I'm doing a good job and that I'm putting good information out on the internet. And if you want to stay tuned to see more DIY projects I do, more tutorials about sewing and whatnot, make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can also click the bell to be notified when I upload. So with that being said, let's go ahead and go on to the demo portion of this video. Alright, hey everyone, I apologize for this setup. I'm no professional YouTuber, I just do what I can with what I have. So let me walk you through what I've done so far. So I want to do the demo first for the picture I have on the thumbnail. So if you clicked on the video specifically to learn how to make that skirt with the button plackets down the side like that, I'm going to do that demo first. I won't make you wait. You just need a simple sloper for your skirt to do this, and the skirt sloper is probably the easiest one to make. I will link a video in the description that has a different demo of how to make a skirt sloper. I promise you it is so easy, and I highly recommend having this in your stash because once you have this sloper, you can make so many things from it. Like the opportunities are endless. So now that that's out of the way, I have traced. This is 1/2 of the front of my skirt sloper. I should have specified that. And I'm going to transform this into an A-line skirt. Now an A-line skirt is basically just adding a little bit of flair to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out and then I'll meet you right back. Okay, now I have that cut out. We're going to do our quick couple of steps to transform this pencil skirt sloper into an A-line skirt sloper. So the way to do that is you're going to focus on this second dart. So this is the center line right here, center front. You're going to focus on this dart closest to the side seam. And what you're going to do is you're going to line up your ruler so that it is parallel to the center line and straight down the center of that dart. Okay, so here's that dart that's closest to the side seam. Here's the side seam over here. This is the center line. So my ruler right now is lined up parallel with that center line, center front, but it's also going right through the tip of that dart right there. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna draw a line from that center of the dart all the way to the bottom, like that. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to get your scissors, and you are going to cut from the bottom of this line all the way to the top of the line, but not through the dart. You want to leave a little piece of paper still attached there, and I will show you why in a second. So I've cut through that line, but it's still attached. All right, so the reason you leave it still attached is because what you're going to do, get a piece of tape ready. What you're going to do is you're going to pivot this until basically you close that dart up. So I've zoomed you in. Basically what you're going to do, let me show you again. You're going to just pivot that side piece until this dart is closed and these edges of the paper are lining up side by side. Don't overlap them, just side by side. Get your tape and tape that down. Okay, so this is essentially our pattern piece for the front part of an A-line skirt at this point. You can see there's a little bit of flare from the center line. I've taken some scrap paper and I've just filled in that gap. It does not have to be perfect. You can see how messy mine is. And then when you do that, just make sure that any paper that's sticking out, you just like cut a flush line between the two pieces. And then for the back piece, it's literally the same exact procedure to go from your basic pencil skirt sloper for the back to the A-line back. It's the same thing as what we just did. So to replicate that button placket down the side, what I need to do at this point is I actually need to flip this on the center line and trace it on a new piece of paper so we essentially have the full front piece of the skirt. So let me just do a little time lapse for you so you can see what that looks like. Okay, so now we have our complete full front piece for an A-line skirt pattern. Actually, let me get my skirt that I used this technique for so we can do a little bit of a hands-on demo. Okay, so here's my dress that I used this technique on. You can see we have the A-line shape going on. So essentially the front piece, this paper we just cut, is what we're looking at right here. However, we're gonna need to figure out how to put this line of buttons in. So essentially what you're going to do, and this could be for anywhere you want this line of buttons, right? So if you want it down the center front, if you want it down the right side, if you want it like diagonally across, this will apply to anywhere. So essentially, look at this as a style line, okay? So let's first look at this style line. So if we go down the center of the line of buttons here, down the center, let's go ahead and measure that. Okay, so it's essentially 2.75 inches in from the side seam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the left side of the pattern because that's where the style line is. So what we're going to do is we're going to line up our ruler so that we are basically from the hip line down, we are parallel with that line and we are 2.75 inches in. So we have 1 inch, 2 inch, 0.75. And there it is. Now, what we're going to do at that point, you're going to cut down that style line. So now, we have our front pattern piece for the skirt divided into two pieces. The bigger piece represents the front right part of the skirt. The smaller piece right here represents that little strip on the left side of the buttons, okay? So, however, you can see these have to overlap a little bit to compensate for the buttons. So how do you know how much to overlap? How much extra fabric do you need to add? Well, let's go over that. This will depend entirely on the size of your buttons. So you need to decide what buttons you're going to use first. In this case, for my skirt, let me double check what it is. My buttons are 3/4 of an inch. According to the textbook that I referenced at the beginning of this video, you will basically extend the garment pieces towards this line. So this piece will extend this way, this piece will extend this way, equal to the diameter of the button. So our button is 3/4 of an inch. Let me just write that down. All right, got my scratch paper. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a pretty significant amount to tape on as an extension. You're gonna tape it beyond this style line. So go ahead and find some scrap paper and tape that all along this style line, and make sure to have a little bit of paper sticking up beyond the pattern piece and beyond below the piece. So let me do that real quick. All right, so I have taped some scrap paper beyond that style line, and it's extending above and below the pattern piece. So let's zoom you in here. So what you're gonna do is you're going to take the diameter of your button, which we have 3/4 of an inch. So I'm gonna line up my ruler with that style line, and I'm gonna draw a new line beyond that equal to the diameter of the button. So we have 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to draw a line that's 1, 2, 3, 3/4 of an inch. There's that new line, okay? Now I'm going to draw another line that is equal to 2 times that. So that would be 1.5 inches right there. Okay? And now I need one more line for seam allowance. If you're confused right now, just hold on. I'll explain it in a sec. The seam allowance I used on the dress was just 1/4 of an inch just to tuck away those raw edges. So I'll walk you through that. Now if you want a little bit more for like assurance, do 1/2 inch, do 3/4 of an inch. It's better to have more and trim it off than to not have enough. So here's my last line for seam allowance, 1/4 of an inch, okay? So we have, the first line was 3/4 of an inch. The second line was double that, 1.5 inches. The third line was whatever you want for seam allowance. I did 1/4 of an inch. So what I'm gonna do at this point is I'm gonna cut along that very last line. Okay, so I'm sure you're asking, Brittany, what do you do about those pieces at the top and bottom? Well, let me show you. We're basically gonna fold along those lines to replicate what it would look like when we're sewing this garment. So I'm gonna flip this around. This might be confusing, but just follow along the best you can. I'm gonna fold on that first line, which is 1/4 of an inch. Next, I'm going to fold again to that second line. Okay, so we've essentially just replicated how this will be sewed. So I'm going to flip this back over, and you can see now what's going on. Hopefully you can. So remember, here's that purple style line. Let me draw it again so you can see. I did it kind of messy, sorry. There's that style line. That's going to be the, quote, center line for the buttons. It's not down the center of the garment, just down the center of that style line. Let me draw buttons, just so you can get an idea. Just try to imagine this is where our buttons will be, okay? So you can see, because of all that extra fabric we added, remember we originally cut along this purple line. If we hadn't have added that extra fabric, these buttons would just, they wouldn't have anything to sit on. So that's what the extra fabric is for, or the extra extension on the pattern piece, that's what that is for. It's to provide extra fabric for buttons to sit on, okay? So if you look in my skirt, so remember we have down the center of the buttons, we have the style line. Remember we drew one more line that was equal to the diameter of the button, so that's from the center to here, that's 3/4 of an inch. Then we drew 2 times that, that's from here to here. And then we drew the extra for the seam allowance. So that's what we've just replicated here. If I flip this over, that's exactly what I just showed you on the underside of my skirt. So that's what you're gonna do when you sew it. Now, as far as the extra little bits, you're just going to keep it folded like this. Take your scissors, just cut along that skirt line, like that. And then do the same at the top. Just cut flush with that waistline. And then, if I unfold this all now, this is our final pattern piece for the right side. Now what you're gonna do is you're gonna replicate that exactly just like we did on this other small piece, but you're gonna do it on this other side. So then when all is said and done, you're gonna have two pieces that overlap each other with enough fabric to sew the buttons on and make sure everything's overlapping smoothly. So let me do that off camera and I'll meet you back. Okay, so we have our completed pattern pieces for the front of an A-line skirt with the button placket going down the side. This is exactly what I was looking for, this kind of video when I was designing this dress. Did not find it anywhere, so I hope it's been helpful to you if you were looking to design something similar. Let me quickly walk you through how you would assemble this. So once you have your pattern pieces cut out, what you would do is sew these darts. So sew that closed, sew that closed. Then what you would do is iron your fabric along this first red line you drew, which means it would be ironed like this. Okay? And then you would also need to iron that extra seam allowance. Remember, roll that under. And that way all your raw edges will be tucked in the button placket. Okay? Then what you would do, well, what I did is I top stitched right along this edge and then right along that folded edge that's currently tucked under. You can't see it. So basically I had two lines of stitching right here. You would do the same on your other piece. So you would iron on that first red line, and then you would iron on the second line to tuck those raw edges under. Then what you would do is, again, well, what I did was I top stitched along those two edges, and I realized I drew this backwards actually. So the buttons wouldn't be on this side. Basically, they're going to overlap like this to make your skirt. So here's that front piece. And what you need to do is the buttonholes need to be sewed on this bigger part. So you would sew buttonholes here, and then you would sew the buttons on this piece. Now let's talk about buttonholes. Your buttonholes need to be as long as your diameter of your button plus 1/8 of an inch. So what would that mean in this case? We have 3/4 of an inch buttons. So that would be a buttonhole length of 7/8 of an inch. So what I did in this case was, and there's no like rule about how many buttons you need to place, how long it needs to be spaced apart. That's up to you. What I chose to do was just a few buttons. Wait, how many did I do? 6. I did 6 buttons. They look to be a couple inches apart. You can do whatever you want. Heck, if you wanted buttons all the way down, you could do that. What I did do in this case, which I feel like you should do as well, is I made my buttonholes horizontal. I didn't make them vertical. The reason that is because if you think about it, so this is going to be sewed like this, right? When you're wearing this, you might cause some stress along this axis of the skirt, right? Like if you're sitting or something and your thighs are like spreading across this axis, you're going to cause stress here. And I know you've been in the situation where if you have a vertical buttonhole, that stress just makes the button pop out of the buttonhole. If you have a horizontal buttonhole, then you basically have the security of if it's like stretching along that plane, it'll just stay locked in the buttonhole. If it's this way and you have stress, it could just slip right out. So that completes the demo for the A-line skirt. I'm going to go ahead and move on to a demo now using a commercial pattern piece that you want to add a button placket to. So for demo number 2, I went ahead and grabbed just a basic bodice piece from a commercial sewing pattern I have. And, you know, I could demo how to add buttons down the center line. I'm going to skip that because there actually are quite a lot of resources for that. on Google, on YouTube. So I'm gonna do something different, and we're gonna add a line of buttons along the shoulder right here. First step again is to trace this pattern piece. So I've gone ahead and done that here onto a new piece of paper. And this process will be very similar to what we just did. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my new style line, basically the line where I want that button, or buttons I mean. I'm going to draw it just a few inches in from that shoulder line. It can be anywhere you want. Just like that. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut along that line like so. And the process again will be very similar to what we just did. You're going to need to know, number one, what size buttons you're using. Let's do 5/8 of an inch. I don't know if that's a common button size, but let's just do it. So I'll write that down. 5/8 inch. That's the size button we're going to use for this example. So again, we need to add extensions onto both sides of this style line. So let's work on the big piece first. First step is to grab some scrap paper, tape that along the line we just cut. Next step is, remember, we're going to draw an extension that's equal to the diameter of the button. So the first line will be 5/8 of an inch away from this line. Let me zoom you in. Here's our style line. I'm going to draw the first line beyond that 5/8 of an inch. Remember that's the diameter of our button. And draw it a little beyond each side of your bodice piece, like that. The next line will be twice that distance. So 5/8 of an inch times 2 is 10/8 of an inch, which is 1 1/4. Did I do that right? I'm not so dumb after all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. I did do it right. Wow, I'm getting better with fractions. Okay, so another line, twice that distance, except I drew it wrong. It needs to be beyond that, the first red line you drew. Sorry about that. Okay. The last line will be whatever seam allowance you want. I'm going to go with what we did last time and do 1/4 of an inch. There's our 3 lines. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut off this extra bit. So I'm going to cut on that last line I just drew. I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to fold on that first line. Then I'm going to fold on the next line. Okay. Flip it over. And I will just cut so it's flush with those edges. So here's the armhole, and I'm just going to cut right along that. So it's flush. And then that is my new pattern piece. So let's do that also for the top shoulder part. So here it is. Okay, so this was originally here, if you remember. So let me put on some scrap paper. All right, and we're just going to recreate exactly what we did. So the first line will be parallel to that style line. And then it will be 5/8 of an inch, which remember is the diameter of our button. And then the next one will be twice that, which is 1 1/4 inch. And then the last line is your seam allowance, and I'm going with 1/4 inch. So there's our lines. Then what I will do is I will do our folding. So I'm going to fold on the first, oh wait, sorry. Before that I need to trim the excess. So cut along that last line. So then I'm going to fold on that first line, which is the seam allowance. Then I will fold again on the next line. I'm going to flip it over and I'm just going to flush cut the excess. And unfold it. And there's my new pattern piece. So let's walk through how you would assemble this. First, what you would do, don't forget interfacing. I forgot to mention that on the first demo. So you'll want to make sure you interface this extension, okay? So what you would do is you would cut your pieces out of the fabric. So working on that top shoulder piece, you will press on the back side. So here's the top of the fabric. You're going to flip it over. This is the bottom side. You will press 1/4 of an inch on this edge here. Then you will fold and press again on that second line you drew. Then what you would do is from the top, you're going to do 2 lines of top stitching. You're going to top stitch along that edge of the seam allowance that's underneath, and then top stitch along this edge, okay? And then you'll do the same with your other piece, okay? So this is your rest of your bodice. Cut this out of your fabric, flip on the back. You're gonna press 1/4 of an inch. You're gonna fold again, press, that's 1 1/4 inch. And then from the top, you're going to do 2 lines of top stitching along that seam allowance edge, and then top stitch along this edge. What you'll have is 2 pieces that look like this, and they're going to overlap so that, remember our style lines we drew? They're going to overlap so that those style lines are directly on top of each other. Okay? So this is shaped exactly like our original pattern piece. The only difference is we have some extra fabric that's folded underneath all this, and this is where our buttons will go. So what you would do in this case is you would sew the buttons themselves on this piece. It doesn't matter how many buttons you do, it doesn't matter how spread apart you want them. They just have to be 5/8 of an inch in this instance since we drafted it for that size button. Then on your corresponding piece, you're going to have to put your buttonholes. And remember, your buttonhole should be the length of the diameter of your button plus 1/8 of an inch. So in this case, that would be 5/8 of an inch plus 1/8 of an inch, which is 6/8 of an inch, which is 3/4 of an inch. So all your buttonholes should be 3/4 of an inch long. I wouldn't be too particular about, like, if you do your buttons horizontal or vertical. On this pattern piece, you could do them so that they're this way, horizontal, or you could do them so they're this way. It doesn't, whichever one you want to do. I hope you found this video helpful. This was a video that I was looking for on YouTube. It didn't exist. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like on the video or a comment, engage in it in some way so that YouTube knows I'm doing a good job and putting good information out on the internet. If you have any questions, please drop a comment. I try to be really active on my comments and respond to everybody. So if you have any questions, just let me know. I think I forgot to mention in one of the demos, just be sure those plackets that we drafted on the patterns, be sure that you interface those on the fabric when you cut it out. You want those to be extra sturdy. I think that's going to be it for this video. Be sure to subscribe if you would like to see more content from me, and I will see you next time.